Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that is going to be coming out for release at Gen Con. We're going to take a look at Subdivision from Bezier Games. Now this is a game that looks very much like a predecessor from the company called Suburbia. Now Subdivision uses a lot of the same art and some of the same mechanisms as Suburbia, but plays out vastly differently. Each player is going to have their own board on which they're trying to place different tiles in order to activate other tiles in order to build out their subdivision and score points for various different things, like having things adjacent to roads, or building a sidewalk that has things adjacent to it, having parks that are surrounded by different types of zones, and various other things. Now real quick, why don't we take a look at how the game plays. We'll see what of course is inside of the box, and we'll come back here at the end and I'll give you my opinions on Subdivision. So here you can see many of the tiles and some of the components for Subdivision, which if you look at these tiles, you're going to be able to kind of clearly see that these are somewhat in the line, or very much so in the theme of the game Suburbia, which you may have seen from this publisher earlier. So these are going to be very similar, and the game is going to play out with some of the same types of rules, but not in the same way. Now what we're looking at here is different types of zone tiles. You can see there are 5 here. We have civic, luxury, industrial, commercial, and we have residential zones. And these are going to be tiles that players are going to be kind of drafting throughout the game. Now, each player at the beginning of each round is going to get some of these tiles. They're going to get 5. You're going to draft 4 of them, and the last one will be discarded. So you're going to get a randomized sorting of these. You'll draft one past to the left, draft one past to the left. Meanwhile, playing these tiles out onto your individual player board. Each player will have a board that they'll be playing on, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit. But they're two-sided, and you can choose which side you would like to use. Now, each of these tiles will do a different thing when they are activated on your board. Activating them does not necessarily mean placing them out on your board, but more when they're placed next to by another zone tile. So you're going to be trying to place tiles out onto your board in order to place them next to each other and activate whichever tiles that you're next to when you place a tile. Now let's just cover quickly what these are going to do. So these 5 zone tiles, first we have the civic tile, and you can see on this tile that we have some trees that are in different directions. You'll see there's a tree here, and a tree here, and there's kind of little indicators kind of indicating those directions. When you activate one of these by placing a tile next to it, something like this, you will be able to place a park in any one of those 3 directions. Now that's just not the immediately adjacent hexes, that's any hex that's in this direction. So you can continue on out in a straight line from any of these 3 directions and place one park. Now these parks are right here. These are not going to be the tiles of your draft. These are just improvements that will come along by activating your other zones. And these are going to give you victory points at the end of the game for the parks. For each one of these different types of tiles it's next to. So each luxury, commercial, residential, schools, lakes, industrial, civic, or streets that it's next to is going to give you a point. The only thing it won't give you points for is being next to another park. When you play the luxury tiles, you'll see that it has a very similar layout. These are all going to get oriented the same way. You always need to make sure that this little icon is right side up and to your left. But this one will let you play a lake in any of these 3 directions. Again, straight out in any of those 3 directions, anywhere you would like. Lakes are another type of improvement that will give you, instead of victory points, will give you money. And money is going to be very important in the game, and you will get money for anything that you happen to play. Next to this, that is not another lake. When you activate an industrial area that's already out on the board, you're going to go ahead and get to place roads. Now, roads are actually just the reverse side of any of the improvement tiles that I've showed you already, as well as the reverse side of schools. And roads are going to be important for giving highway access to your different types of zones that are going to be out on the board. If they don't have access to the highway, which will be out on your player board, they won't be worth any points at the end of the game. So you'll want to build roads, again being the reverse sides of these improvement tiles, to connect buildings or different types of zones to your highway in order to get you access to that highway at the end of the game. And each tile you have access to the highway with will be worth 5 points at the end of the game. A very important thing to do, because that's a lot of points if you can access a lot of tiles. When you activate one of these industrial tiles, you'll be able to place several roads, up to 2 roads, and then you'll be able to place those up to 2 distance away from the activated industrial tile. So you're trying to get those roads out, connect them to the highway in order to connect them to your different zones and give you points at the end of the game. We have commercial zones, and when these are activated, you're going to be building sidewalks. Now, why do you need sidewalks? Well, that's a good question. When you activate one of these, you're going to be able to build sidewalks, and each time you build sidewalks, you're going to have to start building from an edge of that tile, and you'll be building them along the edges of other tiles out on the board. At the end of the game, you're going to choose one of your sidewalks that you've built, a continuous line of sidewalks, and you're going to check and see how many different types of zones it touches, each of these different special zones, and how many different types of improvements that it touches. And basically, you're going to be able to go ahead and get points, including roads. So each type of zone and each type of improvement that it touches, including roads, and you're going to multiply those two by each other. So if you touch all 5 types of zone and all 4 types of improvement, you're going to get 20 points for your sidewalk. So that could be a lot of points that you can earn. And each time you activate one of these tiles by placing adjacent to it, you're going to go ahead and place more roads, or more sidewalks, extending that out and hopefully getting you a lot of points. Finally, we have the residential zones. And residential zones are going to let you make schools. Now, schools are important because you want to build multiple level schools, and that's the final type of improvement that you can see here. Anytime you place next to a residential area, you're going to be able to build a school. You're going to put one of these tiles out, and it must be touching the tile that you just activated. So we'd put a school out touching this. When we build another one, we're going to be able to either place a new school adjacent to that area, so I could, theoretically place another school out adjacent to this if I activated it again, or I can go ahead and I can stack these schools, and this is going to be what you're going to want to do, because a stack of 1 school is worth 0 points at the end of the game, a stack of 2 schools is worth 0 points at the end of the game, but a stack of 3 schools is worth 8 points, and nothing higher than that matters. You can only go up to 3. So you're going to want to try and activate this one tile at least 3 times, to place 3 different levels of school, hopefully getting you 8 points at the end of the game. And you can do this with multiple different areas in order to get multiple different 3-level schools in order to score 8 points at the end of the game if you can. So that's what all of these tiles are for. You have money making, you have victory point making, you have access to the highway in order to get you more victory points. You have the ability to place these improvements, the ability to build roads, to build your sidewalk, or to get your schools to level up. Now, why do we have money? Well, money is going to be important because placement on this board is going to be dictated by the die, and we'll cover that in just a moment. So real quick, why don't we go take a look at a player's player board. So here you can see a player's board at the start of the game. They just have this board. All of this stuff is for all of the players, and we'll cover that momentarily. But each player is going to have their own board, and they can either use this side or they can use the reverse side. The difference is where the road runs here. So this one, the road kind of runs down the middle, the highway. On this one, the highway kind of runs around the board here. And remember, you'll want to have access to that highway via building roads in order to touch your different types of zone tiles in order to get points at the end of the game. Now, at the start of each round, we're going to have a stack of 20 tiles here. And these 20 tiles in a 4-player game at least will get doled out 5 tiles per player, and that will be that player's hand. So they'll take 5 tiles from the top, and each other player will also take 5 tiles. We'll talk more about these tiles on the top of these different stacks in just a moment. Once they've got these 5 tiles, one of the players is going to roll this die, and you'll see on this die there are different colors and shapes. We have red and pink, we have pink square, we have a yellow star, and the player will roll this die, and that is going to dictate where each player should have to place their tile that they're going to choose from their hand. So right now, brown or circle. You'll also note that on this board there are different numbers matched up to these different symbols. So the closer something is to the, or farther I guess something is from the highway, the more negative points it's going to be worth. And the closer you get to the highway, the more negative, or the less negative points you're going to have for not covering that space up. You're trying to cover these different spaces up in order to get rid of those negative points by the end of the game. You'll also note that in the center there is one spot that is worth +2 points. You may always place here, regardless of the die roll, but you lose 2 points for doing so essentially because you cover up +2 points. So it's kind of a wild area, but you don't want to lose those points if you can avoid doing so. Once you've rolled that, each player is going to choose a tile from their hand that they would like to play. And they're going to play it out on one of those symbols on their board. So right now, brown, or they can choose the tree. Now there's a way around this. Let's say I want to play this tile, but I don't want to play it on a brown area. I decide that I want to play this out on this red out here. For some reason, who knows why. I can always pay 2 money from my supply in order to place wherever I would like. So if I don't want to place on a brown, I go ahead and I can pay my 2 money and place it wherever I'd like. Now, being the first tile of the game, that wouldn't make any sense, but just so you know, it's an option. So maybe I decide to play this right here. Now, When I play this, it doesn't activate because I didn't place next to it, I simply placed that tile itself. If on a future turn, when we've passed these, on each round you'll either pass left or right, depending on which round it is, and you'll get another set of stack of tiles from your opponent. Now, after, let's say that I choose another tile, we roll again for the next round, and it's green, and so I place my tile, maybe I choose this one this time, and I decide to place this out here. This is the second round of the game, and now that I've placed adjacent to a tile, this one right here, I would activate it. And that's going to allow me to place a park, and I would place that park anywhere in any of the 3 directions indicated by the tile. So I can either place it on any of these, or either of these 2, or if this tile were open right here, I could place it right here. So maybe I just decide arbitrarily to place it out here. Now, of course, you're going to want to orient these in a way where you can get the maximum benefit of each of the tiles. I'm not doing that right now, as of course I'm just showing you the details of the game, but strategically speaking, I'd want this to be in a place where I could surround it with a lot of different tiles in order to get a lot of points at the end of the game, because each tile adjacent to this that's not a park will be worth 1 point for me at the end of the game. Plus, I don't need it to have access to the road because it's not a zone tile and won't provide me with points that way. So I'm going to want to try and bury it somewhere where maybe I don't have to need to get access to the road, and I can get a lot of tiles around it. Who knows, maybe there. Again, I could have paid 2 money to place it wherever I wanted, and I can always place it on the trees. And then, of course, we would pass the tiles again, and this time I would receive 3 tiles. And I would choose from those, after knowing what the die roll is, where I would want to place it. And again, it's on green, so I can either place it over here next to this tile and activate it again, or I could place it on any of the other green spots. Of course, if I ever place something, let's say the roll was yellow, adjacent to 2 tiles, I would activate both of those tiles, noting that the improvements never activate, they don't have abilities, but that any zone tile you place adjacent to will activate, and you'll be able to use its ability to place out either roads or improvements or various different things on the boards in order to get you point at the end of the game. Once you've finished doing this 4 times, meaning that there will be 1 tile left in everyone's hand, you're going to go ahead and you're going to finish that round. And basically all this means is that you're going to start drawing from the next pile and distribute out a new hand of 5 tiles to each player to start a draft again in the opposite direction. But you'll note that on top of each of these piles, except for the first one, there is a bonus tile. And that bonus tile will give a benefit to anybody who has matched what it says in the center. This one says that if you have 2 parks in your area by the beginning of the second round, you will get 2 money. So that's a way that you will be able to, of course, place extra things out onto the board or place them in areas that you don't necessarily roll in order to place them on the board and maybe activate better tiles. And there are a whole slew of these 2-round tiles that you can choose from, either randomly or you can actually choose one if you think you want to, but I think randomly is the best way to do this. The same is true for the beginning of the 3rd round. This one says that if you have 6 roads, you can activate either one of your purple or your blue buildings. And you would just activate that building and do whatever the ability of that building is. Purple being going ahead and, oh man, now I forget. But purple or blue. Blue is sidewalks, and purple is making lakes. There we go. So, and then in round 3, or 4 I should say, the beginning of round 4, if you have 12 sidewalk pieces built, you can activate a yellow, a gray, or a green. So you can want to kind of gear ahead of time, take a look at those and see if you think you can match those up. Get that little bit of an extra bump at the beginning of the round. They're not game breaking, in order to try and get the most points by the end of the game. Now, at the end of the game, there's little score sheets that tell you exactly how to tally up your points, and we've already covered most of this. But you're going to get points for the things that surround your parks, and you'll mark that down. You'll get points for your sidewalk based on how many of the different zones and improvements that it's touching. Your points for your 3-level schools. You'll get points for money that you have left over. You'll get points for each one of your zones that have access to the road. You'll get negative or positive points for areas that are not covered up here on the board, and that will give you your total points. And whoever has the most points through best drafting and building out their subdivision will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Subdivision. A interesting game for 2 to 4 players, 1 to 4 actually. I forget that it has a solo variant that plays out very quickly. It's kind of hard to tell there, but as long as you have relatively decisive drafters who are able to draft a tile in, less than a minute, you're going to get through this game pretty quickly, because you're going to draft the tile, you're going to place it out on your board, and you're going to move on to drafting the new tile. At first, I thought that the die roll that dictates where you're going to have to place your tiles was going to be something that really turned me off from this game. But it turns out that that little added element of randomness that of course can be mitigated by paying money as long as you've accumulated that money makes the game more interesting. It's just not simply plan out and strategize and make sure that you have everything ready to go. Sometimes the die roll simply isn't going to work out in your favor. And sometimes, even though you may have the money, you will have covered up all of the die rolls that you would like to use. So if you roll green, you've covered up all of your green spaces, and now you have a choice. Either you pay to place somewhere else, or you cover up one of the tiles on your board, the one spot that's worth 2 points, or you simply just can't place your tile because, well, you can't follow the rules of the game. So it adds a nice element there. The different ways to score points can give you a ton of points, and I think paying attention to the accessibility to the road, to the highway, is super important in this game. You get 5 points for every tile that has accessibility to the highway, as long as it's a zone tile. So you're really going to want to make sure that you've got a nice network of roads building through, giving you access to that highway in order to score a lot of points. But definitely don't neglect building schools, because each school that you've got to level 3 is worth 8 points, and that's a ton of points. Building a nice sidewalk that has access to the different types of zones and the different types of improvements can be up to 20 points. So there's all types of way to get points. I think that the variety of ways of scoring points, combined with the minimal amount of different tiles, makes it a strategic and plannable game that's going to require you to use a little bit of luck mitigation in order to succeed. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, keep this one on your radar. It will be out at Gen Con 2014 and available. I believe you can pre-order now, so go ahead and check that out. That is Subdivision.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.